Hi again, and welcome back to Learn to Code by writing Space Invaders. In our last lesson, we worked out how to control the speed at which the aliens move across and down the screen. But as yet, we've still only got one type of sprite showing, and they're not actually animating when they walk. So that's what we're going to really address in this lesson, where we're going to look at how we can create multiple alien types and then have those display in our alien array. So let's get straight into our coding by starting up Take 80. So as usual, we're going to load in our previous lesson 16 code and then save it as lesson 17 to make sure we don't overwrite things, and then just change our number up here. The first bit of coding we're going to tackle is the animating of the walk. So if we look at our current aliens, so I'm just going to press Ctrl R, you can see that we have just a single sprite, and that sprite's being used every time we draw the alien. To create an animation effect, what we're going to do is we're going to create different frames for each alien. So in fact, different sprites for each bit of its walk. So as it jumps, we will change the sprite we use to draw the alien with, and that will make it look as if he is actually walking or taking some steps. So to begin with then, we need to create these animation frames. So I'm going to go across into my sprite editor, and you can see there that we have currently our main alien sprite. First thing we need to do is decide how many frames we're going to have in our animation. And the code we're going to write, we're going to use variables to tell the system how many frames we're using. So you can really choose as many as you want. And it's really down to how much effort you want to put into creating the animation effect. So I'm simply going to use 2 frames. But the important thing is that the frames we use are all in a sequence. So if you look here, this is my first frame, and that is in position sprite position 16. So any frames for this particular alien need to be in 17, 18, and so on, depending on how many you're going to do. So I'm only going to use 2 frames. So I'm going to put one in frame number in sprite number 16, and my next one will then go in sprite number 17. So it's really a matter of trying to draw one that makes it look as if your alien is moving. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go into 16 first. I'm going to use the selection tool. I'm going to select everything. I'm then going to use the copy tool. I'm going to go into my next frame, and I'm really just going to paste them in there. So I'm starting off with the same alien. I'm then going to modify this one to make it look as if he's taking a step. So let's go back into our drawing tool, and let's tidy up these bits here. And again, it's up to you to do whatever you want to do on here and create your own animation. But I'm going to leave it at that. And to test if it was working or not, I can simply come up here and click on my first alien, and then I can use my arrow keys to actually shift to view the next ones. So I can simply go left and right, and I will see the walking animation that I have designed. And again, if you're using 3 frames or 4 frames, then you'll simply just go across a bit further, and you'll be able to see if your animation effect works. So I've now got my animation complete for this particular alien. And again, remember, the important thing is we keep the frames numbered after the first frame. So 16 and 17 are my 2 frames for this one. So let's jump back into our code again. To generate the code then for this, we'll need to come down here to where we're defining our alien control variables. So we have a number of alien variables here. And we're going to be adding into this then. So we've decided then that our animation has a certain number of frames. So we need to tell the system how many we've chosen. And I've chosen 2. So I'm going to go in here. So alien move number of frames, and I chose there to be 2 frames in mine. And again, depending on what you've done, you'll need to put a different number in there. We're then going to use a counter, which is going to tell us which particular frame where our aliens are currently on. So we're going to have an alien movement, and this is going to be our frame counter. And we're going to start that off at 0. And what's going to happen is every time our aliens move, we're going to increment our frame counter. So it's going to start off at 0, then go to 1, then go to 2. But when it gets to 2, at that point, we've actually covered 2 frames. Remember, 0 is our first frame, 1 will be our second frame. So when we get to 2, so in other words, this number of frames, we need to reset it back to 0. So mine will be going 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1. Again, if you've put a 3 in here, yours will go 0, 1, 2, 0, 1, 2, and so on. So that's what we're heading towards here. So let me just take out little blank lines there. So we know that we've used our function to split up all the logic in our code. So the movement bit is handled by our function called moveAliens. So let's go down to moveAliens and see where we can put this in. So inside our moveAliens function then, we have our first bit here. So this bit where we're using the alien move counter, that's where we're doing the time delay to control the speed at which the aliens move. And this line here decides whether it's time to make a move or not. So once that condition passes, in other words, once our alien move counter is less than or equal to 0, we're going to make a move, and that's the point at which we now need to control our animation state. So inside here, we said we were going to control our animation state, and I've instantly forgotten what I called that. So let's just go back up the top here again. And what I will do is I will just copy these 2 down. I'll copy that, and I will go back down to my moveAliens function. And inside here, I'm just going to paste those in, tap it across, and then I'm just going to comment them out using my minus. So at least I know what variable names I've used in this bit of code. So we know that our alien move frame counter, so alien move frame counter, I copy that. We know that we have to increment that. So we're going to make it equal to, and I put it in here, alien move counter plus 1. So we've now incremented our frame counter. So that's going to be doing our 0, 1, and then going on from there. But as we just said, we need to, once it gets to this value, so the alien move num frames, it needs to reset itself back to 0. And there's actually 2 ways in which we can do this. The easiest way is to use an if statement. So why don't you have a look, see if you can work out how to put in that if statement, so that if this counter has reached this value, we're going to reset it back to 0. So see if you can do that by yourself to begin with. Okay, so the code for this then is really an if statement. So we're going to say if our alien frame counter is the same value as the number of frames that we're looking for, where we've put into our animation, then let me go to a bigger font, a smaller font size so you can see that. We want to reset our counter, so our alien frame counter, we're going to assign it a value of 0, and that then will be the end of our if statement. Okay, so when we come in here, we increment our frame counter, we check if it's reached our maximum number of frames. If it has, we reset it back to 0, and then we carry on doing our movement and eventually our drawing stuff. Okay, so our counter here will only ever go, it'll go 0, then it will go to 1, when it gets to 2, it will be reset back to 0, and so on. So we'll continue to go round and round. And again, depending on what number you've set there, yours will count up to, in effect, 1 less than your number of frames, because of course, frame 0 is our first frame. And that's the standard way that we've been looking at doing things, but there are some shortcut methods we can use, and using some of the more unusual features inside the programming languages. And most programming languages have a special function to allow us to do this very easily, this idea of resetting a counter once it reaches a certain value. And the function that we can use for that is something called the modulo operator. And what the modulo operator does, it in effect gives us the remainder from a division. So the modulo operator, let me just use a bigger font size so you can see better in here, is in Lua, and quite a few languages, is the percent sign. Okay, so if I did, say I did 1 modulo 2, what that would do is it would say, what is the remainder when I divide 1 by 2? So if I divide 1 by 2, it doesn't go in, so we don't get any 2's going into it, but we're left with the 1, so our remainder is 1. If I do 2 modulo 2, then it divides in 1, remainder 0. And you can see now that we're getting that. If I do 3 modulo 2, that divides in 1, remainder 1, and 4 modulo 2 divides in 2, remainder 0. So can you see that we're getting our 1 0 1 0 effect happening here? So what we're going to do is we're going to use this to limit our frame counter value. And the way we do that then is we can say here that our alien frame counter value, we're going to make that equal to our alien frame counter value modulo the maximum number of frames. And what that will do, again, I'll get a smaller font size. So what that will do is it will say that we increment it by 1, and then we use this modulo operator to limit it to the values of 0 and 1. And again, if you've specified a 3 in here, then obviously it will limit it to values 0, 1, 2. If you've done 4 animation frames, you're a glutton for punishment in drawing them all out. But it will then limit it to 0, 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so we have now looked at this modulo operator. Okay, so our movement frame counter then will be sitting in here, and each time our aliens move, it will basically saying our aliens need to be on frame number 0, frame number 1, frame number 2 if you have that, and then it will reset back to 0. That's our frame counter sorted out. So when we move, it will update that frame counter and tell us which frame to use. We now need to actually draw that on the screen. So again, this idea of using our functions, we know that all of the drawing of the aliens is handled by this draw aliens function. So inside here, we have it working through each alien, and at this particular point here, it draws the alien sprite. And at the moment, we've hard-coded it to be this number 16. But we now know that we've got this alien frame counter going off. So that tells us frame number 16 is the 0 or the first frame, but then we simply need to add on that frame counter to that to get to the other values. So we're going to add on to it. And again, I've forgotten totally what that we called it. So let's go back up to our move aliens. So it's our alien frame counter. That's the one that tells us which actual frame were you working on. Go back to draw aliens. So it's going to be 16 plus our alien frame counter value. So that will draw, so when alien frame counter is 0, it will draw sprite 16. When it's 1, it will draw sprite 17, and then when it gets reset back to 0, and so on. And again, that's why we have to make sure that these aliens are side by side in numerical order. Well, let's give that a go and see if that works. So Control R, and we've now got our aliens walking and given that little sort of animation. And again, your animation will look whatever way you've designed it. So that gives us the walking effect, but we've still only got one alien on the screen, one type of alien on the screen. So our next thing to do is to get more than one alien type into our array. At the moment, our code is using this hard-coded number 16 to specify the first sprite in our animation. And again, that's simply because we've got this single alien in place. So we're obviously going to have to change that. But the very first thing we need to do, of course, is to actually have more than one alien type. So we're going to go back into our sprite editor. And what you need to do now is you need to decide how many alien types you're going to have. And it's up to you totally what you have in there. And you need to draw them into the sprite editor. Now remember, the aliens need to have their first sprite, and then any following animation frames need to be in the next sprite numbered slots. So in your number 16 and 17 slot. I'm going to do 3 types of aliens, each with 2 animation frames. So I'm going to be using slot number 32 for my second alien's first frame, with 33 then for second frame, and then I'm going to use 48 for my third alien's first frame, followed by 49. So let me add that in, and then you do yours as well. And once we've got all of our sprites in place, on all of our animation frames in place, we'll actually start programming them into our array. Oh, and don't forget, you need to make sure that you have the same number of animation frames for each alien type. You can't have different number of frames for each one. So just bear that in mind, and I'll see you after I've drawn mine. So that's all of our aliens drawn. And again, just to check, we've got our first alien starting in 16 with 17 as his next frame. Next one starts at 32 and 33 and 48 and 49. So let's jump back across into our code. Now we need a way of telling the system which aliens go in which rows. So let's create some sort of data structure that's going to tell it that. So up at the top here, let me go back into our smaller font size. So up here, we need some sort of way of saying which aliens go in which rows. So let's say we're going to create a new variable called alien row types, which is going to tell us which type of aliens go in each row. And we're going to use that as an array or a table. What we're going to put in each element in the table then. So for each row in our aliens display, we're going to create an element in this alien row types array, which is going to store the information about what alien type is in that row. So we're going to have our alien row types element 1. So this is going to then apply to row number 1, which is our top row. We're going to then put an object variable in that element. And at the moment, all we want to do in there is to tell it which of our sprites we're going to use. So remember, we have a base sprite. So we're going to say the base sprite for that one is going to be 16. Oh, and that. So what we've done here then, we're starting to build up this array, and we're going to create an element in the array which will correspond to a row in our aliens. Inside that element, we're then going to build up a little bit of data which is going to describe what we're doing in that row. So at the moment, all we're doing here is we're telling it, I want you to use the alien sprites and the alien sprite animation that starts at position 16. So if we go back to our sprite editor, so position 16 is this ready alien up here. So its base number is 16, and then we'll use 17, and if you've got 18 or 19 set as well, they will then be used in that animation string. Okay, so we've got that one there. So let's fill in the rest of them in here. And again, it's up to you to decide which aliens go in which rows. So at the moment we've got 6 rows. So I'm going to create, let's do it here. I'm going to create 6 elements. So that's going to be element row 2, row 3, row 4, row 5, and row 6. And I'm going to have the first 2 rows being my base sprite 16. My next 2 rows will be the green ones, and the base sprite there is 32. So I'm going to put 32 in here, and 32 in here. And then my last one, his base number is 48 and 48. So we now told the system that row 1 uses the sprites animation which starts at position 16 and so on down for all 6 rows. So again, you can get that set up for yours as well, and it's entirely up to you which sprites you have and which one. You don't have to have them in any particular order. You can mix them all up. It's up to you. But that's now lets the system know what we're planning to do. So this alien row types array then has the information about which sprites are going to go in which row, but we really want to have that information stored in each of the actual alien objects themselves. So remember, we have our aliens array, which we initialize in one of our functions. So that initialization function should really then transfer the sprite information into each of the individual aliens. So down here in our init_aliens function, this is where we actually fill up that aliens array with our individual alien objects. So again, we have it doing our row counter, our column counter, and then in this here, it's saying this particular alien position, setting it equal to this object, which represents one alien. So what we want to do in here then is we want to add an extra bit of information into that alien object, and this will be the alien's base sprite number. Now we need to set that equal to the base number in the corresponding row. So remember, we're working through each of the rows here. So we have our, and I've forgotten what I called that one instantly again. So back at the top here, so we have our alien row types variable, and that has an element per row with an object with a variable called base sprite. Okay, so let's work that out down here. Go back to our init_aliens. So in init_aliens, we have our alien base sprite is going to be equal to, we need to pick out the correct element from our alien row types array. So remember, we have a row counter here. So our row counter that we're using up here will pick out the correct row from our alien row types one, and then we need to access in that object the base sprite value. The base sprite value. So what this will do then, so this individual alien object, we know which row it's in, so we're setting its individual base sprite number equal to the base sprite number from that alien row type element. Okay, so remember that row there will match up together. Okay, so for our first, for mine, row number 1 and row number 2 will have this alien base sprite number set to 16, which represents my red alien, and so on. And again, yours will do exactly the same, because everything is now being driven from our data that we typed in up here in the very top. Up here. Okay? So we've got our row data defined. We've now initialized our alien, so each individual alien knows which set of sprites it needs to use for the animation. All we need to do now is in our draw aliens function, we need to now make sure we draw the correct alien sprite. So let's look at this. So this is where we actually decide to draw the sprite. So let me just move this around a wee bit. So let's take that onto a new line. Okay. So this first expression is where we decide which sprite to draw. So at the moment we've got 16, which was the base sprite number for our first alien. But we now need to change that. Okay. So we know that this expression, so our aliens array, take the row and then take the column from that row, that will give us the actual alien that we are talking to at this point in time. We now know that we've created an alien base sprite variable. And again, let me jump out to the smaller font size. And if we add the alien frame counter onto that, then we'll get the correct frame from this particular alien's animation train. Okay, so hopefully if we run that, we should now get a multi-alien array. And there we go. So we'll just run through that just quickly again, just so you get the idea of what we've been doing here. And let me just take this down to a new line and tab it in so it matches up with this little expression here. Okay, so let's take it through from the beginning again. So we've got our aliens drawn, and we've drawn them in a way that lets us specify which one we're going to use, and that then is followed by a train of alien step animation frames. Okay, so in our alien row types array, we're creating an element per row. So this element is describing how we want to set up row 1, and we're basically telling it at the moment that we tell it that any alien that's in this row, its animation sprites start at position 16. Row 2s start at 16, row 3s at 32, and so on. When we initialize our aliens, we're transferring that information, we're transferring that row information into each individual alien in that row. So each individual alien has its own alien base sprite variable, which tells it which is the starting frame of its particular animation. When we come to draw our aliens, then we're using this expression to pick out this particular alien's base sprite number, and then we're simply adding on our alien move frame counter, which tells us how far along in the animations we are, and that should then get us our correct sprite. And again, because we've done everything through variables and we've set those up in our data structures, as long as you've made your numbers match with the way you've set up your alien animation, so your base sprite numbers match and then the number of animation frames you've used for each of the alien types, then it should all just click into place and we should get our aliens moving correctly. So if you're having problems getting that working, as usual, make sure you check through your code. Make sure you look at the errors and then try and look at those line numbers. Don't forget that all the code for each lesson is on the lesson web page that goes with it. So if you're on YouTube, have a look in the description below and you'll find a link to the actual page on my website that covers this particular lesson. If you're actually on that page already, then just scroll down below the video and you'll find the actual listing there. So make sure you compare with that. One of the things you might find has gone wrong is if you are getting the alien animation not quite picking up all your frames or so on. First of all, check in your sprite editor that you've drawn the correct number of frames for each alien and that they're sitting in order in the grid here. Okay, so make sure the numbers are matching up. Also then make sure that up here you've told the system the correct number of frames that you're using. Okay, so if you started off saying you were going to do 5 frames per alien and then got a bit fed up doing that and only drew 3, then obviously if this is still set at 5, it'll draw 2 blank frames in each animation sequence. Okay, so make sure you get all that set up and work through, and once you've got it all working correctly, as usual, make sure you save your work. So I'm just going to press Ctrl S to save my work. And we'll carry on with our Space Invaders in the very next lesson. So have fun and see you soon. Don't forget to visit the course pages for this project. There you'll be able to download the code for this lesson and get lots of extra hints and tips. You'll also get access to all my other programming, electronics and gaming projects. All the links are in the description below. For more games programming, electronics projects and retro gaming, please make sure you like this video, subscribe to my YouTube channel and visit my website.